Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. As my brother Muhammad Naik introduced the topic, Islam, the misunderstood religion. In fact, it was the topic which was the title of a book written by Muhammad Qutb, which influenced me to become a Muslim some 20 odd years ago. At that time, the book addressed not necessarily the same topics that I will be addressing, but it served the same purpose in terms of clarification of common misunderstandings with regards to Islam, from mostly a political perspective, because at the time when I accepted Islam, I was a communist after having left Christianity for communism. So it clarified for me from a political perspective why Islam was the most effective system, or had with it the best principles for the running of human society and for the protection of the rights of individuals and creatures on the earth. My talk is focused more from a general misunderstanding held around the world with regards to Islam. And that misunderstanding could be traced back to two major sources. If we assume that the world media, for the most part, originates in the West. When we look at the various news reports, it's by AP, Associated Press, Reuters, all these press agencies, the vast majority of them are Western-based. And as such, they influence the media all over the world today. We have to understand that the misconceptions which are prevalent in the media today are a result of either one or another factors, of two factors. The one, or the first, would be that of deliberate misinformation. And that is a product of the Crusaders' period in which they encountered Muslims. This is where Christianity in Europe encountered Islam under the heading of the Crusades, where they sought to liberate, as they saw it, the Holy Land from the Muslim infidels. In order to generate support for this crusade, there were large amounts of false information disseminated about Islam in order to encourage these people to go and fight, give up their lives to occupy this particular land. Of course, historians since then, have pointed out that the reasons behind it were, to a large degree, economic and not religious at all. It had to do with the trade which was coming from the Far East, trade in spices, trade in silk, etc., that the Muslims were the middlemen, and they wanted to remove the middlemen. But it was given this overtone of religious struggle in order to motivate the masses to support this crusade. And we could say today's misinformation, deliberate misinformation, is a part of that. It's an extension of it, or we could say it is a hangover from the period of the Crusaders. What came out of that period, during the period of colonial expansion over the Muslim world, as well as the rest of the world, is a tradition of study known as Orientalism in the West. Orientalism meaning they specialized in Eastern things, Eastern religions, etc. It included others, but focused to a large degree on Islam because they represented the largest group. And it was missionary-based. It was there were systems of study set up in order to penetrate the areas under Muslim control, to penetrate these areas psychologically, intellectually. So they made a study of Islamic texts, etc., to try to find opportunities or avenues by which they could confuse the people, create doubts in the peoples about their religion in order to support their own political control over those given areas. As a result, the Orientalist tradition is filled with many lies, things which are outright lies about Islam. Unfortunately, the approach was not one of discussion and debate, where you sit down and present what your beliefs are, and I will present what my beliefs are, but it was an attack. And as such, unfortunately, that attack was an unscrupulous attack in which they sought to malign Islam in any way, shape, or form possible. So many lies, many things are attributed to Islam, which even the smallest child, if you ask the child, is this a part of Islam? They will tell you, no, it has nothing to do with Islam. Islam doesn't say this. The smallest child can give the correct answer. So we cannot excuse, scholars, PhDs, of Europe, etc., who studied Islamic texts. They learned Arabic to the point where they've understood the Quran, they understood Islamic texts, books of fiqh, etc., that they're going to make fundamental mistakes on very basic things which each and every Muslim knows. This represents the deliberate element in misinformation. Now, there is another element of misinformation which I call the inadvertent element. And that is due to misinterpretations, where people observe Muslims doing something, and then they judge it according to their own cultural or social or religious backgrounds. They interpret it from that point of view. Just as a simple interpretation, for example, if Muslims are seen to bow towards the Kaaba in India, for example, then Hindus who bow to their idols will look at this and try to interpret it in the same light. Well, Muslims are bowing to the Kaaba as we bow to our idols, This is not necessarily a thing of worship, but it is a means through which God is worshipped. This is how it is interpreted. So they interpret it in that light.
Earth, the human heart, greed, exploitation, hatred, all diseases of the heart. For the cure, join Huda TV every Sunday at 20 GMT for Moments for the Heart.
Or, for example, Muslims slaughtering of animals. That in Christian tradition, the slaughter was sacrificial for the removal of sin in Christian tradition. So when they look at Muslims slaughtering on Eid al-Adha, they try to interpret it in the same light. That is one legitimate source of misinformation which we cannot blame people for. It is understandable. It's only for us to try, as Muslims, to clarify to them that it is not as they perceive it. The other source is one of a lack of information, where people don't have information about what Muslims are doing, and they form interpretations or form ideas about Muslims and their practice based on a lack of information. The other aspect of inadvertent misinformation is from the practice of Muslims themselves, where Muslims, in their own ignorance of Islamic teachings, then involve themselves in practices which are incorrect, which are recognized internationally as being incorrect, and as such, people of other ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, then judge Islam based on the practice of Muslims. Again, this we cannot blame others, because it is natural for people to judge a religion based on the practice of the people. If it is common practice amongst these people to do this or to do that, then to say this is from the religion is reasonable and logical, though it may not be the case. So, in this area, we Muslims ourselves are to blame for this portion of misinformation. And the best that we can do is to clarify for them that Islam is not what Muslims do, but what Muslims are supposed to do. And then we clarify to them what in fact are the actual teachings of Islam. Now, what I intend to do this morning is just to look at some of the major areas of misinformation or misinterpretation, misunderstanding with regards to Islam. And I will divide them into three basic areas: one of beliefs, one of religious practices, and the third of social practices. Now, with regards to religious beliefs, the central pillar of Islamic belief is in one God, Allah. And it has been perceived by others that this God is a personal God of Muslims. As when we read in the scriptures about Jehovah of the Jews, he is the personal God of the Jews. From an Islamic perspective, of course, this is not the case. Allah is the God of creation. He is the creator, sustainer of the whole universe, all that exists. And he is the same God who is found in all religions. However, the view of that one God, because the vast majorities of religions in the world do believe in one God, irrespective of what their followers may practice today. If we search back to the origin of their beliefs, or we sift away the intermediaries, we will find a belief in one God, whether you're in South Africa, whether you're in Korea, whether you're in India here, or any other part of the world. The general belief of all peoples is in one God. The difference from an Islamic perspective, not that that one God is a special God of Muslims, but that one God is unique. Unique. When we speak of the oneness of God, we don't mean oneness in the sense of he is one, this glass of water is one, because this is one glass of water, but there's another glass of water over there. There's no uniqueness in that oneness. When we speak of Allah, God, as being one, we're speaking about a unique oneness, meaning that whatever attributes God has, they are unique to himself. That these attributes are not shared by his creation in their completeness, in their perfection. Human beings love, God loves. Human beings see, God sees. But the seeing of human beings is not as God sees. God's seeing is infinite. The past, the present, the future, what is hidden, what is open. Whereas human beings are limited to understanding the present. with limited information about the past, virtually no information about the future, and what is hidden from them they cannot perceive. This is human attributes. So from an Islamic perspective, God's attributes are unique. And this is what distinguishes Islam from all of the other religious expressions in the world today. That what is common to all of the other religious expressions is that the attributes of God have been given to His creation in some way, shape, or form. No matter what system you look into, you will find that these attributes have been given either to human beings, where you have God-men or a God-man, or it is to some of the creatures, as may be held in a variety of other religions. Historically, we have found people worshipping either animal figures or imaginary animal figures composed of a variety of animals, maybe with a mixture of human beings, etc., etc. But objects of worship, in general, end up being objects from God's creation. What is usually raised as a question in this regard is, one, what then do Muslims visualize? See, since everybody else who's worshiping God visualizes God, they have images, either of human beings, animals, trees, or whatever. They visualize God through these images. What then do Muslims do? And we have to explain to them, to clarify for them, that we do not visualize God. Because if we strive to visualize God, then we have visualized His creation. Because we can only visualize what we have seen. If I tell you about something you have never seen, having attributes and qualities you have never perceived in any way, shape, or form, then you cannot visualize it. I mean, these are among the things of this world. If I tell you about a fruit in Sumatra, which you have never tasted, I can only tell you it's like a mango, and it looks like a this, and it feels something like a that. But can you actually really perceive of what this is? No. Until you taste it, you cannot. This is the nature of human beings. We cannot see, our senses cannot perceive or understand what we haven't experienced. So, for a human being to try to visualize God, and some people say, okay, well, God's a spirit. Then, when people say God is a spirit, something comes to mind. That spirit is some kind of a smoky, hazy kind of a thing. You know, there people still are going to try to put something in their mind of what a spirit looks like. So, in Islamic perspective, we don't even say God is a spirit. We don't say this. The spirits are created. The human spirit is created by God. It's not a part of God in human beings, which again, some people, though they say, yes, God is one, unique and everything else, but there is a piece of God in you and me. That spirit is a part of God. This is a common belief. And of course, once you open that door, so for somebody to say that part of God's spirit is inside you and is inside me, there only remains for somebody to pop up and say, well, guess what? Yes, it's true, God's spirit, part of it is in you and is in me, but God's spirit is more in me than you. Therefore, you should direct your worship towards me, because God's spirit is concentrated in me. You have this kind of philosophies evolving, which encourage people towards the worship of human beings. Whereas, from the Islamic perspective, as I said, God is unique in the purest sense. He does not have the attributes of human beings. When He is worshipped by way of His attributes, by our knowledge of His attributes. We worship Him knowing that He is the most merciful. We worship Him knowing that He knows what